will just be laying right there.
Thank you. Good evening. Can you hear me? Because my voice is a little low. But I'm going to try to speak loud, okay? I'm Sister Francisca Aguillon. I'm originally from Mexico, Monterrey, Mexico. And I've been in religious life 20 years, 25, almost 25 years. I'm a member of the Sisters of Our Lady of Charity in Carrollton, Ohio. We have our community, a provincial house. And I'm going to talk about how I got the call to be sister. When I was at home with my family, when one of the sisters from El Paso, Texas, Sister Susana, went to Monterrey to visit her family. And I was the coordinator of the I work for the Hispanic ministry. I get confused. The coordinator for the youth group and in my church in Monterrey. So, and she wanted to talk with us about religious life. And she asked if she can come to one of their meetings, and we say yes. So she did. And that time I was not sure to join the religious life. But when she was talking about the charisma that they have, about working with women in need, especially those who were in prostitution and alcohol and drugs involved. So in my mind was like, oh, that would be nice if I go and help that girls. I would like to do that. So when sister was talking about that, so I asked my father if I can come to El Paso, Texas, and just to see if it was my vocation or not. So my father said no, and I didn't want to leave my house without his blessing. My mother, she didn't say anything. She was crying, and she didn't want me to leave. So the second time I asked again, and my father said no. So finally, the third time, and I said, well, you know, I was 27 years old, and most of my time was working in the church, helping at the church. And I told my father, I think it's time for me to see if it's my vocation or not. So then I will go. And my father said, well, over my dead body. So I was like, oh, how can I do? I mean, I really wanted to go and see if it was my vocation or not. And you know, it's a surprise because in Mexico, every parent will be blessed. We will be happy to have a sister, a nun in their family. But my father didn't want me to be a nun. He wanted me to marry and have children, and I didn't. So finally, I said to him, well, I'm going, even though you don't want it, but I don't want to live without your blessing. But if I have to do that, I will. So, like the third day, he said to me, he called me, he said, okay, if you want to be a nun, just go and see if it's your vocation. If it's not, I would like to come back with us. And he says, the place is here for you. So, and I told them that I will be 6 months just discerning if it was my vocation or not. So, the 6 months passed, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And one time my mother said to me, when I was like 10 years here, and she said, you know, I'm waiting for the 6 months. When are you coming home? So I said, no, well, I'm not coming. So I decided to profess from religious life. And now they're happy. My mother is, may her soul rest in peace, but she was very happy after to see that I was happy. And my father said, okay, go, but do your best and be a good nun. And I tried. I'm trying to be my best, to do my best. And being a religious life, I think what is important is to be open to God's call and to let Him come to your life and let Him to guide you. Because sometimes it's hard, it's not easy. But when you are working hand by hand with God, everything that comes that is sometimes is hard, it makes you to continue, because it's a promise that I made with him. Nobody forced me to do it, and I was happy, and I'm still happy, and hopefully I will die in being religious. But sometimes we think that life is not easy for anybody, for marriage or single life, or it's not easy. But it all depends how do you take the moments that you give to God. You give yourself, like you give everything to Him and to the people that you work with. And I work here in the Diocese of Steubenville for the Hispanic ministry. What I do, I translate and transport them for doctor's appointments, court hearings, and I do pastoral, social and pastoral work, like planning for the Spanish Mass, catechesis, marriage classes, and everything that they need, especially because they don't know the language. So, and we have English classes too for them, so now they are learning the language, which is easier for me because now they can speak for themselves and I don't have to stand up for them. And teach them self-sufficient classes so they can be themselves and help themselves. And I've been working already 8 years here, and I thought it was 5 years. And one of the ladies said, no, my son is 8 years old, and when you came, he was 1 year old. And I said, oh, I didn't realize that 8 years already. So, but seems to me like it was yesterday when I came. I was working in Florida before with the Hispanic ministry in the Arcadia, Florida, and as a pastoral assistant in St. Paul Catholic Church. And when I was transferred, I was very happy living there. When I was transferred to Ohio, I was like, oh, the difference of the weather and everything. So I said, well, okay. So, and I asked if I can stay in Florida because I told my superior, my general manager, I said, well, you know, I'm happy. I really like this place and the people is nice. And he said, well, you better leave now they are nice to you than before. So I did. I came to Ohio and started with I was the directress of novices, but I don't think I was a good one because they left and married. So now two of them are married. So, but I think I did my best with them. I mean, try to help them to discern for their life. And that's how I become a religious life, how the call. My first time that I heard the call that God was calling me was when I was 15 years old. But at that time, I didn't have the permission of my father to go to the convent, so I stayed home and work. And what I did was helping most of the time. I was working after school. I finished school. I went to work and help at the church. I was at the church every day almost, with meetings and planning with the youth group and catechesis and all of these things. And my father one time, he said, you know, I think you better think about your family because it seems like you are living in a hotel. I was like, why? He said, you just come and eat and sleep, and that's it. And I said, no, I don't think I'm doing that. He said, yes, most of the time you are in church. And then you come home and eat and go to bed. So and then he said to me, you know, I think the man that you are looking here on earth, you are not going to find it. He was right. So, and then when I asked him and to let me to come to the convent, and I told him about his saying, well, I didn't say that because I wanted to go to the convent. He said, no, I want you to stay here with us. But was my life. I mean, being always at church, helping, until finally he gave me the permission to, the blessing, because I really wanted to. But our culture is like more family together, that we are very close, that we don't leave the house, even though you are 40 years old, you stay home and you are single. And, and it's the life of the Hispanic culture. So, and the people do not leave their houses until they marry. After they marry, they go and live their own life. But even when they're single, they stay home forever. And, and I didn't want to live without the blessing. So because it was what my parents taught me, always be respectful to them and obedient. And religious life called to be obedient to. So it was easy for me to be obedient. And so that's my life, short. But and now they ask me what is a religious life or religious vocation. Is becoming a religious is a process that begins with a decision by individual with feels called by God. The call has to come from God. I mean, and you can feel the calling. The first time that I feel that call was when one of my friends was ordained as a priest. In Mexico, we have, and the church is a special place for the sisters and priests. And for the lay people, you go to the other side. One side for the priest and religious, and the other side is for the lay people. So that time I came late to the ordination. And I went to the place where all the sisters and nuns were, I mean the sisters and priests were there. So I was like, oh no, I have to leave because I was a late person still. But I said, no, I better go. And so in one of the seminarians, it was, I think it really comes from God, because this seminarian, he told me, oh no, don't leave, you just stay here in the back. So he brought a chair to me and I sat at the back, but I was feeling uncomfortable because that place was only for priests and sisters, not for lay people. So finally I was looking at them and I said, oh God, I wish I can be like one of the sisters who are sitting there. Hopefully one day I will. So it was my first, I think it was my first call, the first time that I felt the call. And the third time, it was when Sister Susana went to Mexico. So we need a discernment. It's a time that you discern about the call from God and in prayer about it, if you have that feeling. And then pray and be faithful to the prayer, because sometimes we think that it's a vocation and you forgot about it, especially to pray, to keep faithful to the prayer and ask God to guide you and to help you to really make the right decision. That is what He's asking you to do. Is to do the will of God, not my will. So sometimes it's hard to do the will of God and to understand what is the will of God. But He gave you the light. So the discernment, I'm talking about the discernment process included prayer, to listen to the voice of the Spirit speaking through your experience and circumstances, to listen with the heart and the mind. The evidence, gather facts, identify your ability, imitation, spiritual, mental, physical, exploring and reflecting on your life skills and experiences, and gather information about all the the choices available. That's a different communities, the congregations, that you can receive the call. And sometimes my first time, my first feeling about this congregation, it was like I wanted to enjoy them, even though I didn't know nothing about them. But what the sister shared with us, it was like really I wanted to go into and help into the girls and the women. So, and then I started investigating about their life and what they do and everything. But I didn't know it was that I had to learn English. So I was so happy to come into a paso and all the sisters were talking Spanish. So it was nice. But then when they moved me to Madison, Wisconsin, nobody speaks Spanish. So everything was with signs. Sometimes we were working in the Holy Name Seminary in Madison, Wisconsin. And sometimes the priest say something to us and we say yes. And then when we say the faces, we say, oh, no, no, because we didn't know what they were saying. So it was very hard. So I had to learn the language to communicate. But even though it was hard to learn the language, I wanted to continue. And until one day I said to the Mother Superior, and I said, I don't think I want to be a nun. And she said, why? Because I will never learn the English. I will never be able to communicate with the people. And I think for me it's better to leave. And she said, oh no, you will. So you just be patient with yourself and you will learn the language. But thank God, I'm still learning. But that's a process. I mean, the reflection, observing and feeling. And especially the relation between you and God. And really I rely on God because a different place, different culture, different language. So everything was, I would rely on everything in God. Oh God, please help me and do this. Oh God, and still asking Him to help me when I need to. I need Him. Every time I need Him. Every time I and observing the directions of your own desire. I just reflect and discovering if your desire comes from God Himself. And decision and confirmation. Making the most loving choice, do I experience peace and joy over time? Satisfaction that I am making the best decision? Or do I experience uneasy in a sense that I should search further? So when you experience that you are at peace, the peace and joy, it's a right decision that you make. That you know that comes from God. Because the only person who gives you peace is God. And the joy, it comes from the heart. We can look for joy and happiness and peace outside of ourselves, but it's in ourselves. Join the community. Once you join a community, when you have discerned about it, that God is calling you to the special community that you choose, and to go through the formal steps of join this included. That's pre-candidacy. Aspirancy is for 1 year. Postulancy is for 1 year. The novitiate is for 2 years. The first vows, you renew the vows every year for 3 years. And the final vows is forever. So you make the decision that you will stay in that community forever. And the prerequisites for becoming a sister, a Catholic sister, you must be a Catholic woman, be single, you must not have any debts upon entrance to the novitiate, and you must be healthy. It is important that you be physically and psychologically able to engage in the mission for the religious community. So those are the requisites that in some of the communities ask you. And you must be 18 to 40 years old. In some communities now, they accept women into their 50s, 18, 25, 40, and 50s. In other considerations, it's like you have a college degree. It's not absolutely required, but they ask for that if you have college degree. And it's it. Do you have any questions? Mm-hmm. You have questions or something?
Could you tell us the mission of your order in particular?
Okay, the mission of my order is to work with women, especially women who are prostitutes and are involved in drugs and alcohol. But we help these women to become whole, to integrate into the community, to them again. Trying to help them to give a job or to find a job for them so they can live that life and become whole. So it's what we do. And we have some sisters who are nurses who work in hospitals. Other sisters work social workers and especially with the women who are battered women who have problems in their homes, and especially our mission is more like for women and children. And now we are trying to work with men because sometimes we work with the women and we are trying to help the women to go to live a better life when the man needs instructions to. So now we are trying to do that too. And working in parish like I do. I work in St. Mary's and Sacred Heart and for the Hispanics, and the main work is working for those women who are in need, and for men too. Mm-hmm. So that's it. It's our mission. Mm-hmm. Mm.
How many years did you say from the time that you begin until your final vows?
It's 1 year for aspirants and 2 years for postulants, 3, and 2 years for novitiate, and 3 for final and for the temporal vows. So we renew every year. So there's 3, 6, 7, 7. Mm-hmm. 7 years before. And when you, we are renewing every year, like for 3 years. And you can renew the vows for 5 years. After 5 years, you have to think about yourself. You want to join the community or to leave the community. But we have up to 5 years. But I did when I was 3, after the 3 years. Even though I have one time I was thinking about my life, how hard it was learning the language and all these things. And one time I went to church, and before my directress, she told us that we have to sit down and write the letter to ask for the final vows. And then I said, well, I'm going to talk with Jesus first, and then I will find out. So I did, but when I was sitting there, I was thinking about how hard it was, going through all the process and everything. So and then I said, I don't think I'm going to write the letter. I told Jesus. I said to him, I don't think I'm going to write the letter. I'm going to go home and don't ask me because I'm not going to do anything. I said, I just want to go home. So and then when I went back to the living room and we were talking about, and the sister said, you have 3 days to write the letter and ask for your final vows. So, and I was like, I don't know, really don't know if I wanted to write it or not. So one day she said, okay, it's the last day. You sit down, all of you sit down, please, and do what you have to supposed to do. You are asking to leave or you are asking to stay. By the time that I finished my letter and I signed it, I was asking to do my final vows. And I was like, ooh, yeah. But I was happy, but I was like, why? God, why you made me to do it? But he didn't. I did. But it was my decision, and I was happy, and I'm still happy that I made that decision. hmm So, any other question? Did I answer your question? Yeah. Oh, they were founded in France, Cane, France, in 1641 by San Juan Eudes, San Juan Eudes, and Jan Eudes. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it well, but he was on the time when St. Vincent de Paul. They were good friends. So, yeah, we were founded in 1641 in France. We are all. Okay, and right now we are 253 right now, but we are going to join the Good Shepherd Sisters, that is one of the branches from our congregation. So if we join that congregation, we will be more than 1,000, because we have different convents in Africa, in France, Guatemala, Mexico, and some different places. So we were over 1,000 sisters. If we join the community, we are working now. We are in the process to join them. Any questions?
Thank you, sister.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm supposed to talk about religious brothers. But before I do that, I want to say a couple of things about sisters. I want to say how fortunate we are to have Sister Francesca. She is really responsible. She's really responsible for the celebration that we had at Our Lady of Guadalupe. But although she seems very patient and very kind, I have to just say one thing. About 6 months ago, she informed me that I should learn how to have Mass in Spanish because Father Huffman might move. Well, and so every Thursday morning for about an hour, we study Spanish, the Mass. And even though she's very patient, there was one word that I simply couldn't pronounce. I can't even think now what the word means. Derecha. What does derecha mean? Derecha. What's right? It means, what does the word mean? Oh, right. Okay. Derecha is part of the list. But I would say diarrhea. And she would go, no, derecha. She said, you're going to do this at Mass? No, you can't say that. Before we get into brothers, today I got this periodical in the mail. Ordinarily, I don't read it. But I was flipping through it, and I saw this article, and it said, nonsense. And I thought, I wonder what that's about. And I'm going to read a little bit of it, and you'll know why I'm bringing this up. Be sure to keep your eyes peeled for the next few weeks, because nuns on the bus may be rolling into your neighborhood. Nuns on the bus. And I thought, whoa. You recall all of the controversy with nuns on the bus when they came here. You recall that I told you that 25,000 people signed a protest against me because I was so mean to these sweet holy nuns. Vindication. This article was written by a professor of philosophy at St. Francis College in Brooklyn. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read a little bit of it because one of the things I got lambasted for is because I made an announcement before they arrived that these nuns were really sanctioned by the church and that they really were not nuns in the true sense. And people said that was, so mean that these, okay. Nuns on the Bus is a project of Network, a nuns group which lobbies for social justice. Then it's got in parentheses, leftist causes with special emphasis on the Catholic Church's oppression of its members, especially women. Before going on any further, these are not your father's nuns. Oh no. These nuns are slightly to the left of Jane Fonda. I love this guy. I'm going to write him a letter and try to call him up. Anyway, finally disrobed, these ladies could take their place on the front lines of society's change, free of the straitjacket of God shamefully distorted by 2,000 years of Catholic lies. These nuns on the bus, saw it as their job to hasten the demise of an institution better left on the ash heap of history. So they want to see the destruction of the Catholic Church. Swinging their once proud wimples and rosary beads over their heads like some tribe of Huns, carrying off the skulls of their victims, these emancipated nuns would teach the Catholic Church a lesson it would never forget. While hordes of them abandoned schools, hospitals, and cloisters, enough of them remained, and like Sherman's march to the sea, leveled everything Catholic in their path. It can safely be said without fear of contradiction that the ruin the Church faces today in every quarter of its life is in large part the malignant fruit of their work. There you have it. Nuns on the Bus has been an undoing that work in creating the number of devastations the Church has endured in the last half century. And here's the one little thing, and then I'll shut up and do what I'm supposed to do. The Leadership Conference of Women Religious, which has been the corporate battering ram for radical Catholic agenda, it has had clear sailing for the past half century, challenged by no one in their Scorched Earth campaign until now. Several weeks ago, Pope Benedict XVI, through the Sacred Congregation for the Doctrine on the Faith, barked, "No more." Well, the nuns were absolutely blindsided and they were outraged. Top strategist, Sister Simone Campbell, and she was one who came here, no relative as I put in the bulletin, spent the last 18 years of her religious life representing poor people at a community law center in Oakland, California. In her words, "I have been a faithful religious woman for 40 years, and some guy who's never talked to me says we're a problem. Oh, that hurts." Well, just in case you missed it, the guy Sister Campbell refers to is Pope Benedict. Get the picture? We're looking at a group of women religious more hostile to the Church than the Church's secular enemies. Not like that sister. That's a sister. These are not. Here's one of those other little sweet gals on the bus. Wasn't this? I love this. I'd love to put this in the bulletin, but I'd be crucified again, and I can't take it. I could just be crucified once, just like Jesus. He doesn't want. Okay. Why is the Holy See making such a fuss? Could it be that in its communication with the LCWR, that the nuns have allowed radical feminist themes to permeate its meetings and hosted speakers who have espoused a rejection of the Catholic faith and silence on abortion. Yes, that could be it. Of course, that is only the top of the iceberg. Add to the fact that the Yale professor, Sister Margaret Farley, and her book Just Love, which mockingly rejects every aspect of the Catholic Church's teaching on sexual morality. Oh yes, Sister Farley is 77 and has been teaching and writing stuff like this for 40 years. 2 months ago, the Holy See censured her to the groans of the New York Times. And then it goes on and, it talks about some of the saints. These sisters say they want to be involved in social work because St. Elizabeth Ann Seton founded school after school not to meet some social need, but to bring souls of the young to God. St. Jean Jagon established an impressive network of homes for the aged because she saw the image of the crucified in the elderly. And St. Mother Teresa of Calcutta carried the destitute poor in her arms, not as a protest against government inaction, but because she saw Jesus Christ, her master, in the distressing guise of the poor. These other poor ladies do not. They have a social agenda. I love this guy. Anyway, I'm supposed to talk a little bit about religious brothers. You've heard of, there are sisters and there are brothers. It used to be kind of thought that if somebody became a brother, or in a community where there were brothers and priests, religious, that the brother was sort of inferior, and because he was sort of not smart enough to become a priest, if they can ordain me, they can ordain anybody. And so they had this group of brothers to do the manual work because they weren't intelligent to do anything else. That's not what a religious brother is. A religious brother is a member of a Catholic religious institute or a community who commits himself to following Christ in the consecrated life of the church by a vow of poverty, celibacy, and obedience. And he chooses to do this in a community in order to serve Christ. The primary vocation, vocation means call. The primary vocation of all of us comes to us in our baptism. We're called to serve Christ. We're called to bring Christ to the world. Some people are called in a vocation to bring Christ to their spouse in the sacrament of marriage. And they are Christ to each other. And they bring the healing message of Christ in a special way to each other through that sacramental grace in the sacrament of marriage. Others are called to bring Christ to the world by being a religious. Some are in a community, some as a secular priest, some as a religious priest in a religious community. Others are called to a vocation in the single life, and they choose to be single, not because they can't find if they're a gal, they can't find a guy to be with, or if they're a guy, they can't find a gal that would have them, so they just are going to be single. It's a vocation, it's a call, it's a commitment that they choose to live to show to the world that their primary focus is on Christ. These people who are brothers belong to communities. They might be a doctor in a religious community. They might be a nurse. They might be a teacher. They might be an electrician in the community. They might be a cook. They might be a parish minister. They might be some kind of an artist. Today, the Diocese of Steubenville has a religious community of brothers that are just in this diocese. It's not a large community. There's only 3 of them left now. We buried a brother today, Brother Anthony. He served under all of the bishops that we have had in our diocese from the very beginning. He was the master of ceremonies. And his primary job was to go with the bishop when he would have confirmation and be the masters, make sure the servers did what they were supposed to be doing and all that kind of stuff, and drive the bishop when he was tired. That was his job as a brother. That's what he did. In addition to that, the reason he could deal with that, the reason he could live with that, is because his primary focus was on his community life. They lived in a house in a community. They prayed together. They got their strength from the support of each other, and they got their strength from their prayer life. And then they went out and did what they had to do. Another one of those brothers used to work in a parish and help out in a parish, visiting the sick, teaching, and doing all kinds of things. So different religious communities developed, and these brothers did the things that needed to be done in terms of our call to service. In terms of the history, I checked this out. I'm not smart enough to know all this, so I got this off of the internet. As monastic, and it made sense, so and I know it's true. As monasticism developed in the early days of Christianity, most monks remained as laymen. Brothers are laymen, even though they belong to a religious community. As ordination to the ministry was seen as a hindrance to the monk's vocation to a contemplative life. Because if somebody was ordained to the priesthood, he had to be concerned with liturgy and sacraments and confessions and all that kind of stuff, whereas the brothers didn't have to worry about all that stuff. And so they could concentrate on prayer and on the work of the particular religious community that they were in. And what happened was, as more and more people became dedicated to life in a community of prayer in a monastery, as the monasteries began to develop, these monasteries were bursting at the seams. And these, like Monte Cassino, they had 300 or 400 monks there. Well, to run a place like that, you had to have somebody. You couldn't be praying all the time. It's nice to pray, but can't be doing it all the time. You go loco. And so, she cut that out too. Anyway, so what happened is that some of these men who were not ordained to the priesthood, what these guys did was they took care of the obligations of taking care of the monastery. Some were cooks. Some were praying for those who had donated to the construction of the monastery. Some needed to, make repairs in the monastery. Some people, they had to grow their own food. Some people had to go out and plow the fields in the monastery. And those things were accomplished and done by the brothers. It wasn't because these brothers weren't smart enough to be priests. The brothers, that was their call. That was their vocation. That's what they wanted to do. And they didn't desire to, be priests and have Mass. They desired to serve God in doing some of these manual things that needed to be done. The problem with that was, in the Middle Ages, that there was sort of a class system that kind of even overflowed into people's thinking now. Well, in terms of a religious community where there are priests and brothers, like in our diocese we have the Camaldolese hermits. There are priests and brothers there. The Franciscans teach at Franciscan University. There are priests and brothers in that community. And the idea is, well, those brothers are nice, but they're not intelligent enough to... No, that's not the case at all. The Second Vatican Council, which went from 1962 to 1965, let it be known that this vocation to be a brother was a special, unique call and vocation and commitment to the Lord. And many brothers have moved toward professional and academic ministries. There are religious communities where the brothers, teach in the college. They have more degrees than the priests do. And they do much of the same work that the priests do. In our diocese, I mentioned the Camaldolese Hermits. The Camaldolese Hermits of Monte Corona. It's the strictest order in the church. I think there's only 68 in the world, 68 men in the world. We have 6 of them in our Diocese of Steubenville. It's the only place in the United States where they have the Camaldolese Hermits of Monte Corona. What do they do? What does the brothers do, and what did the priests do? Their primary job, their primary function, their primary ministry is contemplative. They pray for us. They pray for the world. And they're very strict in terms of people who want to come there. They have to take all kinds of psychological tests and things, because if maybe somebody was trying, the world is kind of nuts. And so I want to go and live there so I can escape the world. Ain't going to happen. They're not going to take you. You want to go there because you feel that you have a vocation to that, they'll look at you. You want to go there because you want to do penance for your life, they'll look at you. I don't know if I told you this yet, I probably will at some other point, but I used to go out there when I was close to there. I'd go to confession out there to Father Charles. He's now dead. He looked like God the Father. He had a beard down to here. And one time after confession, I said to him, you know what I think I'd really like to do? Oh, my dearest Father, what would you like to do? I said, I think that I'd like to retire at 65, and then I could come here and live the rest of my life here. And I could live in the guest house, but I could keep my car, and I could go and I could pick up stuff and be sort of like a part of the community, but yet not. And I said, I could do that like in penance for my sins. And he looked at me. He was real serious, and I thought, oh God. He said, my dearest Father, if you want to do penance for your sins, you cannot wait until you are 65. You better come now. I'm like 32. I said, jeez. That would be a special calling to a special community. I mean, it would be very difficult. Those people are so committed that they can leave the monastery twice a year for 6 hours. And they have to go to like a holy place or someplace that's kind of private. And they're delighted. They never eat meat. They get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and pray the office of readings. And then they have an hour of contemplation after they do that. And then they have Mass. One of them, I don't know if they take turns, or one of them cooks, breakfast. And they put it in a box. And they come and they pick up their box. They go to their cell, their little hut, and eat by themselves. Twice a year, they eat together. Christmas and Easter. They don't talk to each other unless it's necessary. Then they come together for the hours of the divine office. And their whole function is to pray for the church and their benefactors. We have a special relationship with them because we provide the hosts and the wine for Mass, and then at Christmas and Easter we provide their flowers, and we give them $800 for food, that and they pray for us. That's why I think this parish does well, because of them. There are other groups who do other things. The Franciscans in Steubenville, their primary function is to teach on a university level. So there are some priests there. There are some brothers there who do that. There's a couple of brothers there who don't teach, but who take care of the monastery. They take care of the chapel and do those kinds of things. But the idea of a brother is not just, some flunky who couldn't be a priest. A brother is called by God to serve him in that way. And they're happy doing that. There's also a kind of a new thing that came after the Vatican Council. And you don't really hear too much about it. We have about 6 of them in the Diocese of Steubenville. And they're certainly not understood. Again, I got this. This is the Michigan Catholic. I get the Michigan Catholic because I like to know what's going on in Detroit, where they point me out and cheer me out. So I came to Steubenville. But anyway, in here, there's a group called Consecrated Virgins. Did you ever hear of a consecrated virgin? And people think, consecrated virgins, what the heck is that? Well, here's one that wrote this article in the Michigan Catholic, the Vocations Week. This is Vocations. And she says, I'm just going to read a little bit of this. It is the longing of my heart and every day's greatest need in me to be espoused to Jesus. But to be clear, virginity is his gift and my consecration. Whether it happens or not, she wanted to do this. Whether it happens or not is his will. I could never have preserved my virginity or been willing to commit myself solely to him without his grace and his call. Then she says she was in her early 30s. She awoke to the Lord's, to an awareness of the Lord's love for her and mine for him, and began discerning consecrated life. Growing up, I always assumed I would marry and have children, she said. Now, she added, I could not imagine belonging to anyone other than the Lord. Having a series of relationships in her dating life was a further testament that she had no capacity for another man to fill that space. A telling moment came when she went to the Holy Land, she said. It was in the tomb of Christ that I surrendered my life to him and felt his loving response, and I knew his call to consecrated life. Then she made a retreat, and she said, a retreat affirmed my call to this vocation and my desire to live in the world, but yet not be part of it as a consecrated virgin. And so she has a job. She's a secretary someplace. She doesn't live in a community. She doesn't have the support of a community. But she's a consecrated virgin. She formally, in the presence of a bishop, she made the vow of virginity. And a lot of people, she said, doesn't understand why she did this. And she said it was a life-changing experience for me. I'm so thankful to God for all of the ways he's intervened in my life. So regardless of the future, I hope to daily dedicate my life to the Lord, always desiring to be his servant and hopefully one day his spouse fully in God's presence in heaven. As a consecrated virgin, it is my eternal vocation from our Heavenly Father to live solely for his Son in the midst of the world. It is truly an espousal vocation. To me, to be a consecrated virgin means to know and love Jesus as my divine spouse, to relate to him my prayer and in work and in play as my spouse. People look at these people, consecrated virgins, and they think, they got to be a kook. Because the world today doesn't see any value in that. They don't see any value in being a brother. They don't see any value in being... Why would you want to waste your life doing that? That's kind of the attitude of the world. And sometimes that's the attitude of parents if their son or their daughter wants to go to the convent or the seminary or join a religious community. And there are all kinds of different religious communities. They do all kinds of different things. Some religious communities of sisters and or brothers dedicate themselves to hospital work. Some are teachers in high school. Some are teachers at a college level. Some do work with the poor. They do all kinds of things. Anything that's charitable that Jesus does or did, that's what these people do, because we're called to serve. We're called to bring him to the world. So that's kind of basically what the brother is. What my role is as the vicar for religious or the delegate of the bishop for religious. If there was some kind of a problem and a sister or brother had and they didn't want to talk to their superior about it, or they were having some kind of a crisis, or there was some kind of a problem in the community, they could call me up and I would talk to them or try to help them out. And sometimes I would go and visit different groups just to let them know that, we appreciate what they do and the diocese cares. Christmas and Easter, they get a letter from me, Christmas card. We have a celebration for the sisters and one for the priests, religious priests every year, because we're grateful for the tremendous work that they do. We could not carry on the work in the Diocese of Steubenville that's done if they were not here. And in our diocese, we have about 130 sisters, and we have about 60 religious priests and brothers. So we have a lot of them here. Want to know anything? Because if I don't know it, I'll just make it up. Is that all right?
Okay, I'd like to pull everything together here. Did you say good luck? Oh, thanks. Okay, well, I'll pull some of this conversation together, maybe not all of it. Okay, this is a tough one. We always struggle, it seems, as a team talking about vocations and when we get to single life. And I always get lots of questions about this. Marriage is pretty clear, and priesthood is pretty clear, diaconate's pretty clear, even religious life. But, okay, what about the singles? Let me stop for just a minute and think about vocations. When we talk about vocations, a call from God to a distinctive state of life in which the person can reach holiness. I'm not talking about, as a teenager, you're trying to discern what job you want, but what path is your life going to take? And this is the difference, again, between where we are in here and talking about God and when you get out there in the world in secular society. And we're saying, you have to think God first. Even when you walk out the door, what is God calling me to do? Not just what kind of job do I want, how much money do I want to make, how do I want to be seen in the world? What is God's call for me? The Second Vatican Council made it very clear that there is a universal call to holiness in the church. We are all called to be holy. Through baptism, through confirmation, we all should be able to participate. We should participate as full brothers and sisters in the ministry of Christ. We are a part of the priesthood of believers, the priesthood of the faithful. We are called to spread the gospel and live it. Not just live it, but live it to the fullest in our lives through our example, through what we do, through our actions. We know that priesthood and marriage both are sacramentally consecrated. When we look at religious life and we look at single life, those are also holy calls. Those are consecrated lives. They're called to holiness as well. When we look specifically at single life, everyone is single before you choose another state of life, before you move on and decide that maybe that's not your life's vocation. We're all single. We all start that way. Many people go back to that state of life. There's a lot of reasons that we may change. As with any vocation, we have to pray, we have to discern what is our vocation, and we commit to that. That's something that I know as a parent I try to teach my children. I feel that's lacking in society today. Commitment. We don't see people who commit to things and see them through and finish what they've started. We see that a lot in marriage today. People decide, oh, I think I want to get married. I'll try it out. If it doesn't work out, it's a disposable society. I can change my mind. I can do whatever I want. We have to understand commitment in our lives and in our vocations, in our calls. This applies not only to marriage, not only to priesthood, not only to diaconate or to religious life, but to singles as well. If this is what we are called to do, we make our commitment. We choose that. We've all been single at some point in our lives. Some are still single. Some will go back to that state. Single life would seem to be the norm as one state that everybody has in common. But society often tries to tell us that it's not normal. We have to look at it differently, just like we do so many other things here at the church. We have to look at it through God's eyes. He made each of us individually. He made us unique. In Latin, the word single means unique. We each have gifts that we're given. We talked a little bit about that when we talked about the Trinity and we talked about the Holy Spirit, that we ask for and we're imparted with gifts. We have to be open to receiving those gifts. Those gifts can help us in our vocation. In time, we pray to have the wisdom, the understanding, and the awareness of those gifts, that we can share them with others. In time, we're seeking the best way to do the will of God the Father. God gives us two direct commands. He says we should love God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, and with all of our mind. He also says that we need to love your neighbor as yourself. An important part of that is you have to learn to love yourself. You have to learn who you are before you can share love with others. You have to learn to love yourself. You have to learn about who you are and what you're called to do before you can share that with other people, so that you can accept others, so that you can share love with others, and so that you can accept love back from others. I think back to, we used to have a team member, we had a team member who was single, Georgine, and she would get up and do our single talk. So that's kind of always the funny part of the team. We say, you know, we want a married couple to talk about marriage, and we need a single person to talk about the single life. Well, she used to talk about the single life, and she would get up, and she was a very strong-willed woman, and she'd get up and she'd say, I'm single. I'm an SSH. And we'd all look at her and go, you're a what? And she'd say, I'm single, I'm successful, and I'm happy. And we'd all look at her and go, okay, we can tell that. You know, she was a very positive person. She was very confident. And she said, I have chosen this life. I've chosen to be single. I like who I am. I like what I'm doing. I like where I'm going, and I'm happy with that. And I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And she got up and she made it very clear that there was nothing wrong with being a single person. And there isn't anything wrong with that. We all got to chuckling, though, because the one year she got up and she started talking. And as she's talking, she's holding onto the podium, and everybody starts giggling. And I'm sitting there going, what are they giggling about? And as she's doing this kind of thing, I look down, and she has a sparkly on her hand. And I'm going, you can't give my single, successful, happy story anymore because you're going to be married, aren't you? And she said, yeah. I said, well, okay, that's fine too. So, you know, just another story of how We can change our vocations from time to time throughout our life. We make a commitment. She was committed and believed firmly and was happy in her state of life. And then God said, you know what, I have other plans for you. And that was okay. The single life is a call from God. It is a vocation. All vocations are callings. They're callings for us to be the best that we can, to serve God and serve Him in the best way that we can. The paper that I gave you has just a few points, things that I want to point out about single life. There are a lot of myths, a lot of misconceptions. We think that single people are lonely. They're not complete because they're lonely. They're by themselves. Society says people are single because they can't find anyone to marry. That's the only reason they're single. That's not true. Again, that's society's perception. All single people want to be married, don't they? No, not necessarily. That's a call. Single people are actively looking for someone to marry. That's not true either. The single life includes lots of different people for lots of reasons. People who might be looking for a spouse. Maybe they aren't looking for a spouse. There are people who are career-oriented, and they've decided that's the route that is more important in their life, the way that they can share God, the way they can live their lives to the best of their ability. There are consecrated men and women, as Father pointed out. There are people who are in the non-consecrated life, but they still choose to be single. There are widows. There are widowers. There are people who have been abandoned or divorced, and they're in the single state of life. There are those who are just discerning what vocation they want to choose, and they are still single. There are challenges and blessings both about being single, as with any vocation that you choose. Some people would say, oh, well, they're single, they've got it easy. They don't have to take care of anybody else. They have all the time they want on their hands. They can do anything they want. They don't have to worry about anybody else. Well, it's like any vocations. There's pluses and minuses, challenges and blessings. And I've listed some there for you to take a look at, just to keep in mind. Sometimes, as we've talked about all these other vocations, it helps us to have a good perspective on where somebody else might be in their life if we stop and think a little bit about what they're going through and what they're dealing with and thinking. Challenges. Loneliness. Sometimes we don't think about that. That's not necessarily unique to single life. Perceptions that people have about a single person. A lot of people believe those myths that I mentioned before. They'll have people trying to set them up wherever they go. Come on, don't you want to meet my friend so-and-so, and we'll all go out together. People often feel awkward around a single person. Just as in a single group, someone who's single might feel awkward in a group with married people. So, it works both ways. Being faithful to Christ and following Christ, that's a challenge for any vocation. We all have to do that. We all have to follow Christ and be faithful in our lives and in the way we practice our lives. Blessings, when we look at the positive things. Yes, they have more freedom. They have more time to help others, to serve others, to follow Christ. Their spirituality, they have more time to spend on that. I know as a wife, as a parent, that's one thing that I always have to struggle with. Do I make time, do I take time for my own faith life? As I'm doing all these other things for my family, for my husband, for my job, for things that I'm involved in, do I take time for me? And the grace that God pours out on each of us in each of our vocations, the pluses that we have. If we're going to discern our vocation, things that we have to think about. We focus on discipleship. You have to grow with Christ every day. Let Him shape you. Let Him help you become the person that you're called to be, to trust in Him. Prayer. That's a key point. We have to pray for guidance. We have to learn to practice Catholic morality. Listen to the teachings of the Church. Take note of your abilities, of your interests. Listen to others. Sometimes other people, and I'm not talking about just strangers or just anybody, but sometimes people in our family can see our lives better than we can ourselves. It helps to talk with other people and have them help us in decisions. Be patient. Remember that God makes things clear to us in time. Sometimes we ask for something, we don't see it right in front of us as our answer. Maybe we're looking so hard for a certain answer that we're not seeing the real answer that He's sharing with us and giving us. On the table over here in this book, Outlines of the Catholic Faith, there is a nice section on vocations. This is a very easy read book. So these are over here on the table, so before you leave tonight, make sure that you pick one up. And I'd like to take time. Does anybody have any questions on the whole topic or any comments or thoughts? Anything you want to share? No? Okay.